So I told you the other day that TCU really struck out on some guys with that 2023 transfer class, but some of those players still have eligibility, and there's some guys that could bounce back in a big way. We'll talk about all that and more next here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Thanks for making the show your first. So listen, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're also available wherever it is you like to listen to podcasts. Subscribe on all those platforms. We're free and available wherever podcasts are found. Thank you for making me part of the show daily, or watching on YouTube, or you're listening the old-fashioned way, how podcasts were originally consumed. But I appreciate it regardless of how you're taking in the show today as we continue to get closer to that first game against Stanford. The other day I mentioned that this is going to be a big year for TCU's scouting department. And, yeah, colleges have a scouting department now. I mean, basically it's kind of like the NFL. There are a select few guys that their job – and Jeff Jordan's got some different roles, but his main job is to scout for TCU. And I heard Sonny say on the Ticket radio station in Dallas earlier this offseason, because Corby Davidson was asking him, like, how do you possibly, with all the players that are playing around the country, how do you possibly find the time and ability to narrow that field down and narrow your scope so that you're not breaking down film for every player that could potentially hit the portal? And Sonny said, well, the way they've gone about it is they have a list of guys that they had good relationships with from the high school recruiting process, so they didn't end up landing these players, but they built a rapport with the family. They feel like if they were to jump in the portal, it would be really easy to strike up that conversation again. And then they also have a list of guys who are from the Metroplex, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that if their name goes in the portal, they can quickly get a scouting report going and say, hey, if you want to come back home, we think there's a place for you to fit. But it's a big year because, in all honesty, a number of the guys that they brought in during 2023 – they kind of struck out on. They were players that didn't find the role that they were looking for this past season. The good news is some of those guys have more eligibility left, so they're going to be back on the roster again this season, and maybe another year under their belt, some time to recover, they could bounce back. And so some of the names I'd like to bring up today, the first one is Dalen Wright, big outside wide receiver for TCU. And he came in last offseason, had some minimal production at Minnesota, but had done some big things, like had a really good game against Ohio State a few years back, had 86 yards against Wisconsin in their season opener 2 years ago. So he showed flashes. Now, overall in his career, coming into last season, he had 365 yards in 2021 at Minnesota and then 280 in 2022. Last year, 11 receptions, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, when he made plays, he made some big ones. I mean, I remember he had a big catch and touchdown against Colorado, another big catch and touchdown against West Virginia. You saw that size and ability at times, but he dealt with some injuries, missed a lot of time. And this upcoming year, he's battling with Eric McAllister for that second spot on the outside. Savion Williams has one outside wide receiver position pretty much locked down, and then the other one is a battle between Dalen Wright and Eric McAllister. And it reminded me of Kane Robb, who hosts the Locked On Golden Gophers show. I reached out to him when Dalen transferred over, and originally I tried to get him on the show, but logistically it just didn't work out. And so I said, hey, could you just give me a little background on who he is? And I wanted to read it because I just think it's important for this context to be shared. He said, honestly, I can tell you that the staff and his teammates have both said the talent on Dalen is unreal. Size, strength, and speed are great. He's just built to be a dominating wide receiver. One of his newer teammates in January at Minnesota prior to transferring even said, this guy might be one of the most gifted wide receivers I've ever played with. The only thing that stood in Dalen's way is Dalen. Not necessarily trouble off the field, but attitude, disagreements with usage, or giving up on a play. When he's on, the dude is an absolute alpha wide receiver. He has caught the eye of scouts who have come through, great hands, can win the contested catch, great at the high point, speed to separate, good in route running, and has put the work in to have his body right. So all the potential in the world, and you hear those comments from our teammates in Minnesota were like, look, this dude can play. He's very gifted. He has the talent and the skill set to be a dominant outside wide receiver. So that's all super positive. And he spoke with the media earlier this week. He said he's excited for the season. He did bring up an interesting sort of anecdote, and he, as many other coaches and players have mentioned as we lead up to the year, just said, hey, last year culture wasn't fully there. It wasn't fully ingrained. It didn't come together like they wanted it to. And he said, I think a lot of the transfers that TCU brought in, we were trying to all get to know each other, and we didn't have a great feel for our role and understanding one another before that Colorado game, which I can't really disagree with that. It is super intriguing to hear him say that, because the whole reason that I was super confident in TCU going into that game was I thought they had a lot more continuity than Colorado, which was basically starting a whole new team. And I think at the end of the day, there was a more even playing field with all the turnover that both rosters had. And what honestly showed up in that ballgame in my mind was the quarterback for Colorado, Shedeur Sanders, was better than Chandler Morris, and Travis Hunter was the best player on the field. And there were other things that went down. Defense had a horrible day. But, in my mind, the big plays that had to happen, they happened for Colorado, whether it was that interception on 3rd and goal by Travis Hunter, the big catch on a 3rd and 18 where the defense finally had a chance to get Colorado off the field and make a swing play. But bottom line was, all that turnover that Colorado had, or essentially starting a new roster, it didn't really matter because at the key positions they had better players that day, and TCU made mistakes. But Dalen's more comfortable now. He says he's got a really good relationship with Malcolm Kelly. He's coming in. He's working hard. He's ready to rock and roll. He's got a better chemistry now with Josh Hoover because they've had more time together. So I hope it works. The few times that I brought him up this offseason, I have said I'm a little wary because I just think at a certain point you are what you are. People can change. Players can develop. They can grow. But, we're talking about year 4 of playing football for Dalen. And I would love for this to be the season for it all to come together and coalesce and really pop for him. And you might say, well, we said the same thing about Savion Williams, but Savion's had more production through his career. And, he's got some questions to answer too. All that being said, TCU still has a chance to kind of change the narrative with that transfer class that they brought in, like with a guy like Dalen Wright, who's going to get another shot to play this year and be a bigger factor in this offense. Another player that fits that mold is Colton Deary, who's moved over. He came over as a center. He could shift over to guard, depending on what happens between him and James Brockermeyer as they battle it out. But he's a good interior offensive lineman. Made the move from Maryland, wrestler in high school, good size, good athletic ability. There's a chance for him to be a key centerpiece of this offensive line. JoJo Earl, another player that came in with a lot of potential as someone who could make things happen on special teams. Also, just as a good receiver, it looks like they started him in the slot. Now they're going to bump him to the outside, which I think is kind of a curious move, but with his size. But he did have a really good game against Oklahoma. It felt like he was starting to get more comfortable as the season went on. And so that's another name. Okay, there's an opportunity here to sort of change what we know about these players, because it's not just a one-year rental. There's a chance for them to continue to grow and develop as players under this coaching staff. J.P. Richardson obviously had an outstanding season last year. Jack Besh dealt with a lot of injuries. They're going to try to move him around in the formation. He was a former freshman All-American at LSU. This is a guy with talent that can play. I'm super excited about both the tight end room with a dude like Drake Dabney, also Chase Curtis, who's been around for a while. but then you add Jack Besh into the mix with how you can move him around the formation, whether it's in the slot, as an inline tight end, in, H-back set, whatever the case is. Can you isolate him in some favorable matchups? That's going to be a key for Kendall Briles and this coaching staff. So a lot of dudes who have a chance to sort of flip what we thought about them after last season. Trey Sanders was good in short yardage at times last year. Sonny Dykes says he's healthy. And that running back room is another spot that going into spring camp, even Sonny admittedly was like, you know what, we had concerns about it, but Cam Cook has answered the bell so far. Trey Sanders behind him looks healthier, looks like he could be more explosive, even though you don't really need him to be a home run hitter. You just need him to keep moving the chains, get dirty yards, converting those short yardage situations. Nate Palmer, super talented freshman. Trent Battle has done some nice things, catching the ball in the backfield, sort of a change of pace, third down back. And then you brought in Dominic Johnson from Arkansas, who's also sort of a battering ram. I wonder if they go to some more two running back formations this upcoming year, just to keep the defense guessing. And there's a lot of cool things that you can do. And maybe that takes the place of some of the quarterback run game that Kendall's been so known for in his career, having an extra option back there to hand the ball off to, but it's an actual running back as opposed to your typical QB. So there's an opportunity for TCU to really change the way we viewed that transfer class, because there's a lot of guys on this roster who could have breakout seasons despite what happened last year. Another player that's looking for a bounce back year and that spoke with the media, Johnny Hodges, the linebacker. He talked about the defense, what he's excited about. We'll break that down coming up next. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day. I do need to talk about our friends at FanDuel. It's the summertime. Unfortunately, the Rangers stink. They're in a bad way. They lost an extra inning game to the Red Sox tonight at Fenway Park. I'm recording this on a Monday evening, but the summer is the perfect time to join FanDuel. One, we're getting closer to football season, so there's going to be all kinds of prop bets and over-under, win totals, all those things that are happening right now. But also at FanDuel.com or on the FanDuel app, they are giving their customers boost and bonuses every day. That's right, every single day this offseason, they're giving customers boost and bonuses. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Make it a reality today. If you love sports, which you probably do because you're listening to this podcast, why not give yourself a chance to make some money off of it? FanDuel, official betting partner of Major League Baseball and a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So Johnny Hodges also got a chance to talk with the media. And first thing that stood out, Johnny changed his hair up a little bit. He looks kind of like a villain in a teen movie or in a surfer movie. He's got just beach blonde hair. If you saw what Joe Burrow did when he showed up to camp, almost like the frosted tips look, not the frosted tips themselves, but that type of blonde color all throughout his hair. Now, Johnny's got more flow, and it looks pretty cool. And he said that every year he does this, it's just kind of a, hey, we're going into the season. Let's do something crazy. Let's have a cool mentality. And he mentioned that he was actually going to dye his hair purple, but that didn't look great. And so he decided to go with the blonde look. But if you check out the Frogs Insider YouTube page where his press conference is up there, you'll see what I'm talking about. By the way, if you want to hear more cool stories about college football, make sure you make Locked On College Football your second listen. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season with discussion on the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the newly blonde Johnny Hodges was talking about this defense and what he's looking forward to. He says install's going really well. They feel like they know what they're doing. honestly, he just mentioned the challenge now is recalling all the things that they learned at the start of spring camp. So there's still new concepts being introduced. They're trying to digest those, trying to get them down, make sure they're mastering them, but they're also trying to keep in mind all the different things that they were learning at the beginning of this process. And he said this is a really complex defense. And, Bud Clark went into detail when he spoke with the media a few days ago about how much he loved this defensive line, loved what they were doing, the fact that as someone who's playing in the secondary, there's not as much pressure on them. They don't have to cover for nearly as long because they're getting pressure on the quarterback. And when Johnny Hodges was asked by Jeremy Clark from Horned Frog Blitz about what he's most excited about within this defense, he just said the different fronts, the different coverages, they're going to disguise a lot of what they're doing. And last year that was not the case, right? He didn't bluntly say this, but people that watched the TCU defense understood that was not a defense that was really known for or was trying to confuse people. They're trying to play straight up, keep things in front of them, and it didn't work. Now, bringing more pressure, it's not just a magic formula for success. But trying to confuse the offenses that you're playing, keeping them guessing, that is a big deal. And if TCU can do that on a more consistent basis this year and take advantage of it by causing turnovers or creating negative plays, then that will be a huge boost for this defense the upcoming season. He also said that he feels like the culture is better. He doesn't hear nearly as many people that are complaining like they did last year, supposedly. I'm at the point with the mentality stuff. I just need to see it on the field. I really appreciate that the guys feel like they're in a much better place with that. But ultimately, it's going to have to happen on the football field before I fully kind of buy into the wholesale change that they're talking about. But I love what they're getting at with, just the fact that the team is interested in moving forward, having more of a dog mentality, and really repairing some of the issues that were there last year. So exciting things happening with his defense. And I think there's definitely a role for Johnny Hodges with what they're doing. He took heat last year because, he was put in some bad situations. Offensive coordinators figured out that isolating him in coverage and space was a way to make things happen. And so hopefully Andy Avalos can shift that responsibility off him. Not completely, but just put him in better situations to succeed. But as someone who can come downhill and have good run fits and be physical and make plays in that aspect of the game, they need dudes like that because they were not good at stopping the run last year. Coach Avalos said recently, the first 6 or 7 practices of fall camp, that's almost exclusively what they're working on. Because if you can't stop the run, if you can't be good at the point of attack, if you're getting shoved off the ball, then your defense is not going to be good. And so they have to get back to more of that physical mentality. I think Johnny's going to be a part of that. And I'm excited to see all the different wrinkles that the defense can use to their advantage this year, because it's going to be a totally different scheme and approach than what they've been doing. So hopefully they can catch some teams by surprise. Starting with Stanford, by just having very different looks on the field than what they put out there this past season. And maybe that's good for a win or two on the schedule, which would be a big deal and a huge boost, considering that wasn't really something, it didn't feel like they caught anybody off guard last year, especially on that side of the ball with what they were doing. But it was exciting to hear from both those guys. And Johnny wasn't a part of that 2023 transfer class. He was part of 2022. He's still here, though, and has a chance to, bounce back and erase what was a tough year for the whole defense last season. And he was put in some tough situations himself, personnel-wise. We'll get some of your reaction when we come back. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. eBay Motors, whether you're trying to level up your car to peak performance or just maintain your vehicle, you need to check out eBay Motors. Millions of parts for your MVP. You can win every time with parts that fit your ride. They have the eBay Guaranteed Fit program. You put in the make and model of your vehicle. You choose the part that you think you need. You put it in the shopping cart. It will tell you immediately, yes, this is the right part. No, it's not. You will not burn rubber, or you'll burn rubber, not cash, with the help of eBay Motors. They're not going to have you wasting your money. Don't take a chance. It's your car. You can't really afford to, right? You need the right part for your vehicle. You can't make a bigger problem when trying to fix the current problem that you have. Millions of parts for your MVP. Win every time with parts that fit your ride. eBay Motors. It's super easy. ebaymotors.com. Give it a chance today. Check out that Guaranteed Fit program that makes things so simple. So I asked the audience yesterday, are you concerned that it appears the defense is ahead of the offense in fall camp? Also, what's your win-loss prediction for this upcoming year? I'm at 8-4 right now. Richard Berry says, I think correlation between the coordinator's comments on where each side of the ball is shown up here. I have confidence in this team, and I believe that if they get a running game going, that they should ride that train all year and continue to let Josh and the other QBs develop. So what Richard was talking about was when Andy Avila spoke with the media, he said they're already on Stanford prep, and they've been on that for a few months, honestly. Like, they've been really hitting it hard with install, trying to get the concepts down, trying to understand all facets of the defense. And Kendall said they've taken more of a measure. He mentioned how they haven't started preparing for Stanford yet. He also said that he doesn't look at practice as a chance to win competition against Andy Avalos. Like, he's just trying to work on his concepts, understand what they're doing, and get to a place where they're mastering the things that they want to do. Jim Norris said, Steve have always understood that the defense usually comes together faster than the offense. Yeah, I think that's conventional wisdom, and that's sort of football 101. It just surprised me because of the new scheme the defense is installing. So I thought that would be flipped on its head a little bit this year at least. I will say last year, the offense seemed to be ahead of the defense, and we were all sort of like, oh, well, this offense is just going to be really good. And that did not happen. The offense struggled, but the defense did as well. And so, it can tell you, or it can give you a little glimpse into the team at times. Vince Breyer says, in my experience during camp, defense is always ahead of the offense. Offense is more experimental. Browse is likely figuring out how his key players will respond in given situations. You're right. I mean, it's more complex with the offense. You've got a lot of moving parts. You're trying to figure out what's working. You're trying to get timing down. Defense is a little more instinctual, flying to the football, making plays. I would also venture to guess that the offense is not really showing their whole playbook. And so the defense is starting to kind of get a feel for, okay, if they're in this formation or line up this way, this is probably what they're running. Tanner McKinney says he thinks they'll have a 7 or 8 win season. He's a strong believer in the run game and the defense in the pass game. He's not fully convinced, but he would love to be proven wrong. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I think 7-5, 8-4 would be a step forward, and I feel like that's very doable. Let's see here. Devil Frog says, with the talent this team has year in, year out, 10 wins has to be the minimum every season. That'll be the threshold for a playoff bid. Well, I certainly think that's a good expectation to have. I don't know how realistic it is to have that expectation each and every year, but I feel like, yeah, that's what Sonny Dykes wants to do, and that's where he wants to get his team at some point in his tenure. William Royal says, with this schedule, I think even at 6-6, there's some issues or in major injuries. If you go 7-5 or 8-5, he thinks that would signal improvement and give you a chance to really build on 2025. Yeah, the thing about the schedule to me is I get where people are coming from. I feel like there's going to be a lot of competitive games on the schedule, though, which means you have to be really good in the details and you have to win close ball games. And that's not something that TCU did well this past year. Hopefully they can improve on it this year. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day.